the generosity of all that you give to help make life better for others. It's also one of the things that I love about the two gentlemen that I'll be introducing today. They've been very engaged in helping to take education in Utah to a new level. You are probably familiar with Dr. Rich Kendell. He formerly served as a commissioner of higher education, has worked as a superintendent in Davis District. So he has both the higher ed and public ed perspectives, which is really interesting and really useful. He also worked with Boyer Company for a while. He was a consultant on education to the governor, I believe Governor Levitt, and has a wonderful wealth of experience that he brings to the discussion about education. He's been giving much of his time lately to try to help all of us take things to a new level. And then Alan Hall is the current chair of Prosperity 2020, which is a statewide movement to help take education in Utah to top 10. You may feel like we're already top 10 because we've so long been a leader in education, but in recent years, things have been slipping a bit, and these two will tell you more about that and things that are exciting things that are happening to help improve. Alan is you probably know him as a seasoned entrepreneur, and he was the founder and chairman and former CEO of MarketStar Corporation. He currently is the managing director of Mercado Partners. And if you get a few minutes with him later, ask about his exciting new venture called Tempus Global Data. Did I get that right, Alan? Always involved in something interesting and wonderful, and also an investor in great ideas. These two have been working on Prosperity 2020. Other groups have been involved, Education First, the Salt Lake Chamber.
Is one of its focuses, education, not only here in Salt Lake City, but worldwide. We recognize that Rotary is very of these devices up into the heavens to look back at the earth. It will change the way we look at weather forever. I have 6 married kids. For our education, as you would for your own posterity, for your neighbors and everyone else, we need to make sure that you work. And certainly at this point, you're the city, and you're going to see that the state of Utah is having some issues. And Dr. Kendell and I want to sort of respond to what needs to be done because we can't continue with the status quo. When we get to the end of the presentation today, we have a way for you to reach out to your legislators to say, we encourage you, we persuade you to do everything in your power to make sure that the students in the state of Utah have proper funding. And right now you're going to find that's not the case. Not only that, is that we do not know from year to year what sort of money is available for education. And as businessmen that plan and knowing how you're going to finance it. One of the we have in terms of Prosperity 2020 is recognizing that the business leaders and all of us in the state of Utah that have businesses and employees are constantly looking for talent. We need to make sure that we have a skilled workforce that will help us to deliver to our customers. Now, whether that be a product, whether that be a service, all are engaged in making sure we've got the right people in the building on the bus that will help us deliver what needs to be taken care of here to make sure that we're successful. In 2020, there will be almost 5 job openings in the state of Utah. Now, you might say to yourself, aren't we graduating from universities and tech schools that workforce? The answer is no. We will miss the mark unless we increase our efforts around educating the youth. When you think about what's going on in colleges, we graduate really only 40% of our student body. When you look at high school, it's around 80%. We have this major gap where we're leaving students out of the mix in terms of getting the proper education for them to continue on and be part of the economy and the workforce. The issue for us is that if we're that workforce and supply the people we need, businesses in Utah or those who come to Utah will look elsewhere. In my own case, with 6,000 employees, we only have about 800 in the state of Utah. We've had to look elsewhere across the United States to fill our needs because they can't find enough here. You're going to find that other companies are going to have the same issues. They won't come here because we don't have the right talent. They don't have the right skill set. Growing companies in Utah will have the same problem, and it's going to be a limited supply of people, and we tend then to steal from one another because we need the people to help us grow. So we have an issue, and we need to solve it. So Prosperity 2020 and Education First have made a determined effort to figure out what we can do to influence government to move forward. Let me point out historically that in 1995, we were number 7 in the United States in terms of the state of Utah investing in education, number 7. And today, our achievement at that point in time was we were in the top 10 of the United States in terms of student outcome and getting the right education. And we were in terms of the country, in terms of the best place to do business. Today, we find ourselves in terms of the investment in 31st place. Our kids are in the middle of the pack. They're no longer in the top 10. And what worries us is if we look forward now, what will happen because we've not properly invested? Will we have the economic success that we enjoy today a few years from now because we didn't properly invest in our workforce, in our youth, and in our... So there is a direct correlation between job performance and what comes out of that workforce that's been educated properly. How and what can we do then to drive the economy going forward? We were asked by the Legislative Educational Task Force of the legislature to come up with a plan. Then. If we're here to argue about it and complain about it, then why don't you come up with a plan, they said. So that's what we've done. We have circulated a plan with the intake from a number of organizations, teachers, parents, superintendents, principals, PTAs, everyone you can imagine, to say what would be true in order for us to then achieve the results to move the needle academically. We're going to present it to you here in the next couple of minutes. So you'll see the people outcome. We have measurable outcome, we have accountability, we have innovation. We've looked at it as business people and said what would have to be true in order for us to move the needle. Dr. Kendell will give you a little bit of an overview of those particular points. Now, lastly, I want to drive home the point that our educators, our teachers, our administrators in the state of Utah are first class. They know exactly what to do to get the job done. And to that point, where I live in Roy, Utah, I decided to go to the Weaver School District Superintendent and say to Dr. Stevens, would you give us permission in what we call the Roy Code? That would be the high school and 8 elementaries. Would you give that administrative body permission to come up with their own plan of how they would fix things where graduation rate is at 70%. That means 30% of the kids out of Roy High don't grad. What can you do to move the needle, I said to him. And how much money is going to be required to accomplish this? You wouldn't be surprised to find that those teachers and those administrators did come up with a rigorous plan of ownership of how they would get things done. So what I'm here to tell you is that if we give the teachers and administrators the sufficient amount of money they need, they will manage it well, they'll own it, and they'll get the results that we anticipate next year. With that said, let me invite Dr. Kendell to the podium to give you sort of an overview of this plan and what we expect to do. Dr. Kendell.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Alan's warm-up back, so we've got this just a little bit reversed. And you know, in every organization, there are communication problems. I've heard Alan talk about Roy Cohn forever. I thought it was one of his business associates in New Jersey. It turned out to be an education program in Roy, Utah. I've got a few slides, and everybody has warned us, don't spend a lot of time on this presentation. People here will have questions that are much more interesting and much more provocative than anything you can present. And I'm going to take that in part. So I'm going to hit a couple of things that I think are important. We are just unabashed advocates of education. We think that the investment in people, we think the investment in education is going to propel our state. And we think all of the good evidence is on our side. Look at this college graduates. You can see that less than a high school education, the poverty rate is 24%. For those that have less than a high school education, their unemployment rate is just incredibly high. I want you to look ahead to that section there for a bachelor's degree. And you can see that the poverty rate is 5% or less. The unemployment rate is 2.2%. And that if you have a graduate or professional degree, you're going to make almost 3 times as much as a person who has less than a high school degree. So it's the college graduates that are going to propel us to a much better future. College graduates contribute more in taxes. I think this is pretty clear. If you see, we have about 38 and 20, about 66 of the population with some education or a bachelor's degree, and they pay 88% of the taxes in this state. So it's good for kids, it's good for families, it's good for businesses, it's good for everybody. I'm a Utahn. I love the state. I love being here, but we're not without some problems. And it's always a difficult line to figure out where your praise of the state stops and we have a realistic assessment of where we are. But there are some issues that we need to take account. We have robust employment in Utah, but most of it is low-wage jobs. It's low-wage jobs. The average, the median wage in Utah for everybody, all occupations, is $12.80. We need to get that up over $20 at least. Household income has been stagnant for. We've made no progress. For the typical family in Utah, they're making almost less money today than they did 10, 12 years ago. Utah's largest employers, because he's so tied into the tech industry, we haven't really arrived yet in the tech industry. We're really a state of small businesses and government. Of our 20 largest employers, only 4 of them are private sector. First one is Walmart, second one is Smith's, Food King, Bank, and the 4th one is L3 Communications. All of the other major employers in Utah are government. Look at Seattle by contrast and the economic engine that they are, where you see the headquarters of Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, Boeing, and the list goes on and on. I wish we could say that when people from outside the state look at Utah, they would say, this is a state that does very well. They're not well funded, but they are doing extraordinarily well. This is just one report. This is coming from, this is called Leaders and Laggards. It's by the U.S. Chamber. You can see that in academic achievement, we get a C. In academic achievement for low income and minority students, we get a C. We're basically just in the middle of the pack. Now, I'm not going to drag you through all these slides, but when you look at the ACT that many students take before they go to college, there are 4 benchmarks: school science and mathematics and so forth. Those benchmarks, if you look at how the percentage of young people in high school meet all 4 college prep benchmarks, it's 24%. That's not a good number for this state. We don't do well internationally. This is the program for international assessment. It's called PISA. You can see that the USA is way down on the international level, and Utah, of course, is below the USA. Our bottom line is these 3 statements, I think. Across America today, the most vibrant, economically healthy cities and states put education first. Decades of research show that a person's earning power and a society's wealth are tied to educational achievement. Creating the best educated workforce will help continue to grow Utah's economy and meet the demands of Utah's future marketplace. So we used a study from Stanford University, and she looks at the country and says the whole country is getting divided up into areas of incredible prosperity and areas that are just also lands. And those that are really prosperous are areas of very high achievement. The most glaring example is Boston and Detroit. Boston 20 years ago made a major investment in their schools, both public and higher education, through the Massachusetts Educational Reform Act. 20 years later, they have the best public schools in the country and some of the best higher education institutions in the country. In Boston alone, half of their chief executive officers, half of them come from the research universities right there in Boston. So we've got work to do. By contrast, you look at Detroit. Now, I know this is complicated because they lost their major industry, but 20 years ago, Detroit and Boston looked a lot alike. But they neglected their school system, they neglected their higher education program, and today Detroit is a bankrupt city. They have the worst test scores in the nation. They are not going to drive that economy quickly out of that mess. We're not Boston, but we like. We're not Detroit either, but we'd like to move toward the Boston profile. I have children living in Los Altos, and I know this is just an anecdote, but it was interesting for me to take my 4-year-old granddaughter, Libby, to school, and I got lost. And so from the back seat, I said, Libby, I can't find your school. And she said, Grandpa, do you have an iPhone? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, do you have Google Maps? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, well, drop a pin on the home school, and it will take you right there. She just turned 5, so when I took her to school, she's in what's called transition kindergarten. So she started as a 4-year-old. I met her teacher, and her teacher came out and she said, we would love to have Libby involved in this program. And she handed me a little flyer, a little yellow flyer. And it was sponsored by Google and sponsored by Lego, and also, this is not a private school. This is not a charter school. This is just an ordinary public school. Pre-engineering, that's the course. 4-year-olds. So she's working on these little miniature circuits, and she's learning about electricity, and she's doing all these things in a standalone STEM center at her elementary school. Public school. We talk about early childhood education in this state, and we get nowhere. we're trying to say, we don't necessarily want this for privileged kids. I have to say, my daughter is a privileged child. My granddaughter is in a privileged environment, but she's getting such a jump start. It's just incredible. We're just saying, we've got 10, 12, 15,000 impoverished young people right here in Salt Lake City that don't really have a good chance at finishing high school. Let's give them an early college jump start, or an early school jump start. But we're just not getting very far. Okay, I'm going to go through this. Business community put together a plan. There's one for water, there's one for roads, and now there's one for education. Our goal real quickly is Utah will rank in the top 10 states for reading by grade 4. We're now 22nd. We want to be in the top 10. For math, we're now 27th. We'd like to get in the top 10. For graduation, we're 25th among the states. We'd like to get in the top 10. For degrees, now talking about higher education, we're 18th among the states. We'd like to get in the top 10. Here's our plan, and it's kind of detailed. Now, we're Skip Danes. I want you to know we haven't forgotten the arts. Dean, we haven't forgotten the arts. Our budget is built on an increase of the weighted pupil unit, the basic funding formula for education of $50 million a year, plus full funding of growth. Utah has all this growth, we have all these kids, but we don't fund them. We kind of fund them. So if you do those two things, we're going to have better schools all the way around. And I think every young person in this state deserves to go to an elementary school where they have a great experience with the arts, where they can understand geography, where they can go on field trips, where they can do science, where they can have a robust reading program. We're focusing, at least for our improvement budget, on reading and math. And we hope that by the 4th grade, our kids in Utah will be proficient readers and mathematicians, and we are a long ways away from that mark. In higher education, we're saying, and I just finished as the acting president of Southern Utah University. We did a major survey of our students. And we said, why here? You've been a regular student university, and you're not here this semester. What's happened? 53% of them said, I've just plain run out of money. I just can't afford it. Well, we're losing way too many students, and so we're hoping for an increase of funding for the Regent Scholarship and for performance-based scholarship. Alan Hall started the Dream Weaver program at Weber State. We need that statewide. It basically says as long as you will go to school, take 15 credit hours, and maintain a B average, we'll guarantee that your tuition will be enough. We'll give you enough in tuition that you will be able to stay in school. Now that's privately funded. We have the lowest per pupil funding in higher education when it comes to need-based aid. For the nation, it's about $900 a student in need-based aid. In Utah, it's $51. So we're losing a lot of kids. They start college, but they don't finish. Now, we looked at the US Census, and I don't have a thing on this, but it's just illustrative to me the nature of the problem. We have a lot of young men and women who school but don't finish college. The US Census published the top 10 cities for having the highest percentage of students who have some college but no degree. 3 of the 10 are in Utah. Leading the pack, Provo-Orem. First place. In about 3rd place, it's Salt Lake, and then it's Ogden-Clearfield. That's a distinction that we don't want. We want young people to go to college. We want them to stay and finish and get their degree. So, that's it. We think education is the future for our state. It's more important than building a new prison, We think it's more important than a lot of other things that the legislature is looking at. This is the future, and I'm sorry for those of you who are big prison matters. Okay, I think we're done.
We do have a few minutes before our normal adjournment at 1:30 to take some questions. If you have one, just you two can jump in and ask either one of them for questions.
Alan encouraged me to just show you one quick thing. So you may know that the governor has been very supportive of education, made that a high priority. The legislature has been supportive of education as well, and great things for education this session. And so your help in contacting them would be greatly appreciated and make a real difference during this season particularly. So to make that really easy, let me just walk you through something really quickly on your phone. So you can do it now or do it later. Would you, if you have your phone, would you just look up slchambervote.com? And so it's SL for Salt Lake, chambervote.com. And there's a really easy thing that will walk you right through that process. There's a form that's already there. You can change the words, put your own words in, but it will pull up your legislators immediately so that you can easily contact them and voice your support for taking education to top 10. If you have any questions, see me afterward, but I will, it looks like you're more interested in asking questions, so I'll let Rich and Alan answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Dr. Kendell and I agreed to take only simple, easy questions. Who has the first one? Yes, ma'am.
I realize that money is a problem, but I often wonder if any of these groups have explored spending our money more efficiently, maybe doing like what business would do and take on lean practices, flatten the administration chain, maybe limit the number of districts, consolidate. Is that on the table as well?
Well, I can tell you, at least from our point of view, we encourage education to be more efficient, be more productive, and look at those sorts of things. I think there might be a tradition that hasn't been something they've explored all the time, but there's a great initiative right now where some of that is being looked at all the universities and across 41 school districts. So we're saying if we're going to give you more money, let's make sure you're being efficient with what you are now. So yes, ma'am, that's underway. Yes, sir.
I totally applaud your efforts and support that. I was surprised when you said there's great things for the legislature. It did seem like the governor was supportive of paper. It doesn't sound ridiculous in terms of money.
You know, the governor has put forward a plan, a substantial amount of money. We have a little bit of surplus this year. He also has a mandate to look 10 years ahead, so we're happy with what he's doing. When we meet with the legislative leadership, they're all behind what we've talked about here. And they said to us, we'll try and move these cats. We'll try and move these unruly legislators behind us. But their counsel to us was you contact them, you encourage them, you persuade them to vote correctly on this, because they look across all the things they have to fund, and they therefore may not focus on what we think is most important right now. So for all of us in this room, and that's the reason Janet gave you this way to contact your legislator, is they all have to vote for this. So it's not the leadership of the legislature.
You know, we all believe in education, and obviously we're going through a transition. We used to have the ABCs. Now we're getting into critical thinking. The computers have changed us. We're now moving faster, exponentially on everything. What do we have in the area of competence on the teacher end? Because the schools will always be there, but the teachers are something that has to come with it.
Yeah, good point.
Well, I think quality teachers are right at the core of the educational process, and standards for teachers are much better. But we're going to run into a pretty pretty serious, we have a serious shortage right now of math teachers. We have a pretty serious shortage of science teachers. And we've got to find ways to let the market help with that. Somebody asked me the other day if you could have one wish, what would it be? And I said, give every math an 11-month contract. So few of them have them, we need them for 11 months. So you're opening up an area that's, I think, very important. Some progress is being made. If you want to say about administrative costs, we have the lowest administrative overhead in the nation. So some real efforts have gone into that. Now, I have to tell you a funny story because I was a superintendent and I thought, I'm going to really do this up right. It was the worst mistake I ever made. That is, I had 2 adjacent elementary schools and I said, I think one principal can handle both schools. Experience is the sum total of all the bad mistakes I won't. Every school needs a principal. We have very low overhead, so I'm pleased about that.
Yeah, Quinn?
I want to respond to your question and maybe there is some support and there's some great potential, but people contacting their legislators. So it would be really helpful if you have interest and you're supportive of this, if you would do so or encourage your neighbors. Because it's a unique time where there is some great possibility, but a lot of work is yet to be done.
Dr. McKay, I know you had a question.
In college, when kids try and decide majors, it's often look to see where the education system rank with other professions. And in business, when you want to improve your employees, the amount you pay.
Our teacher salaries are low by the regional standards. We'd like to think that we could make those salaries better. In higher education, as you know, you've been a professor, they're quite market driven, and a professor of mathematics at the University of Utah will probably make more than the professor in the Fine Arts College. That market is not quite in public education the way that it is in higher education. I think they're going to have to move in that direction. So we have said the legislature needs to fund growth. That will help. And they need to put money into the weighted pupil unit, and that will help. And teachers will get better incomes as a result. But we are not attracting, cultivating, and retaining the best of our young people to be teachers. And until we get to that point, we're not going to have a transformation of education. So that's a long process we've got to work on.
President Obama has suggested 2 years of community college free. Does that help your program, or is that a hollow benefit of education? It doesn't seem to me, it seems to me that you get what you pay for, and at that age you should be giving to get an education. So I just wonder.
I don't think it's policy. Study this, figuring out how the school is. There are a lot, but provide need-based aid, provide scholarships for students to help them finish. And for some students, surprisingly enough, a small amount of money can mean the difference between finishing and not finishing. It could be $1,000. And if we had a corpus of money in the state we could use to help the most needy students finish college, it would be a major advancement. We just neglected it, and we can't continue it.
Yes, sir.
There appears to be, your whole presentation was focusing on college. I work with people every day who have no desire to go to college. They work with their hands as an electrician or a pipe fitter or like that. We have wonderful ATCs here in the state who do a phenomenal job for about $4,000, giving somebody a fairly decent education where they might be able to make the kind of money that you've talked about on your chart. Does your plan talk or incorporate any of those things also?
It does, and we've met with the UCAP people, the group of colleges that are technology-based, and we recognize if we can get students into those programs, we can probably get the 500,000 new jobs. But you look at executive level, don't need that many, mid-management, and then the workers, skilled workers is really where we're going to fill it in. And the UCAP program can do a lot of good in that area.
Follow-up question, if I may. I work as a manager at an employment center right now. I'm finding that there are so many people who are underemployed right now that if we went after them, found them through a little bit of additional education and training, they might be able to fill some of the jobs that Richard Nelson's advocating right now. Does your plan include something like that?
It does, and I agree with you. And for good or ill, we consider the trades and all post-secondary education as college.
Okay.
We wanted to say to a young woman who says, I want to be a plumber, I want to be a pipe fitter, that's college. You go for it.
You go to their training center, it's 5 years. It's as
That's
much
right.
as anybody with the BA.
You want to be Toyota certified, go to Weber State, and you'll come out and start at $68,000, $72,000 a year. And they go all the way up to 120
6
or
figures. Yep.
150. Funny, when I go to kindergarten, I always get the guy that's making 150.
Yes, sir.
You've identified a lot of areas for investment, which all appear to be very worthwhile. In my experience, just handing money over to government entities is not a smart thing to do unless you've got some yardstick to measure their performance by after you've given them that money. Have you
That
developed?
is part of the plan, so you'll see that there's money going to certain things, and we want to see how that outcome is measured, so we do have that sort of a program as part of it.
That's key.
One of the best systems in the country right now is called SAGE. It was developed for Utah. It allows for assessments, teacher by teacher, classroom by classroom, school by school, district by district. So we will know exactly how students are doing through this assessment system. Now, there's a little pushback on that, but I think it's one of the greater developments that's happened in the state, and we should be very proud of it. So, yes, we want accountability. We want people to say, you've got this money, it's what you're getting back, and it's a more literate society.
Gentlemen?
Yes, let's go over here and we'll go around the room, and then we're about ready to wrap up.
Yeah, I think this will be our last question.
Last question, okay.
Alan, you know that I work in technology, things that I'm observing and seeing, and this, I love what you're doing, but it's very conventional. It seems like it's a very conventional approach to education. What I'm seeing amongst young people, especially those who aspire to work in technology, not on the trade side of technology, but the actual hands of, digging into programming and developing, is an abhorrence from a conventional approach to education, because it's not required of them anymore. What was required of them to go through and be an information systems graduate is no longer, and they're looking to shortcut that because there's such a high demand in the market. So I would be interested in knowing, are you looking at less than conventional approaches to open source education that they're exposed to now? We can't get our hands on some of the, these kids are graduating college with lots of recruiters where they're starting at 120,000 and you can't get them. So they're moving into these quick courses where they can become they can learn languages to write programs, as you know, and they're looking to fast track. And I know that conventional education, when you look at a broad historical, to substantiate what you're doing, there's a lot of value in that, but there's a transition away from conventional education too amongst the younger mindset. And I think I'm one of the few here who have less gray hair, who look at things from a younger perspective, maybe, of how they view education today.
Well, yeah, you've asked a lot of interesting questions. I will say that technology is having a big impact on the way that we deliver education. I took a little trip with my oldest granddaughter a couple of months ago. She was busy working away at her iPhone. I said, what in the world are you doing? You ever put that thing down? She says, hey, I've got a report to give at Skyline High School. I said, well, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm writing my essay. I've got to do a 10-page essay on the effects of global warming. or lack of effects of global warming. And I said, you're doing the whole thing on your phone? She said, yes, all my resources, all my data, all my research is right here on my iPhone. And when I finish it, I will put it through my editor, I'll put it in my Dropbox, and my teacher will read it. Sounds good to me. So the problem that many teachers are having with respect to getting into different ways of delivering instruction is that the legislature took away all of their staff development money. All of them. $80 million worth of training. Now, who here works with the big, anybody work here with a big platform of computers? It's like saying Dell is going to move to a whole different platform for scheduling, a whole different system, but there's no training for all the agents. It just doesn't work.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
In closing, education is such a complex issue. We've really just touched on things today. So the thing that gives me hope for the future is that there's more collaboration than I think there has been in the long term as we're trying to find out these answers together. So hope to continue to engage with you and appreciate being here today. Thanks.